Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers, along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right, the guy who's gonna scare the hell out of you, which is a promise that he made approximately 35 years ago, just a few days prior to this recording, and it was with his one and only directorial effort for 1986's Maximum Overdrive. And yeah, I've talked like briefly about this film here and there, but I think it was more so when I did the Films That Forgot the Face of Their Father series, and I took in the 1997 made-for-TV reimagining called Trucks, which had the same name as the short story from what Cavalier in 1973, I think, was when King originally published this short story about all of these machines becoming sentient. And in the short story, if I recall, even though it's been a few years since I've checked it out, I don't think it really gives any sort of explanation like we get in this film. But yeah, King was at the height of his excess, but also popularity, and he had his buddy Dino De Laurentiis and Martha De Laurentiis, and they had already done a few Sai King films. So they had done like The Dead Zone, they had done Firestarter, they had done Ka-Tet Sai, and they're like, you know, why don't you direct, Steve? That's why we have this wacky, insane film, and this is the Vestron, I believe it is, Vestron Video Collector Series, and they did a really bang-up job with this deluxe edition. Great behind-the-scenes stuff. There's also discussions and like retrospective looks back with Martha De Laurentiis, Laura's character, Brett. She has to sit down and talk. The kid who's all grown up now. Some of the VHX peeps or VFX peeps. So yeah, there's a couple different commentaries too. This is a badass version and just exploration of the sheer madness that is Maximum Overdrive. It actually came out on July 25th in 1986, and who could forget this crazy, just King in lunatic mode trailer.
Hi. My name is Stephen King. I've written several motion pictures, but I want to tell you about a movie called Maximum Overdrive, which is the first one I've directed. A lot of people have directed Stephen King novels and stories, and I finally decided if you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself. It was my first picture as a director, and you know something? I sort of enjoyed it. I just wanted someone to do Stephen King right. So come and spend some time with me and my friends at the Dixie Boy. Spend some time in the dark. I'm gonna scare the hell out of you, and that's a promise.
Maximum King.
I adore me some Sai King. El Rey is my favorite author, as you can see by all of the books and collectibles and silliness behind me, but yeah, he really went for it in that trailer, man, and he made a lot of interesting promises and just declarations, I guess, but the thing about this movie is that it's so darkly comedic, and I don't think there's anything scary whatsoever in this. And the reason that critics savaged this to the tune of, I think it only has a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's like a 24% on Metacritic. But then again, if you look at IMDb, where it's got like a 5.5 out of 10, and then you look at audience score, which is also featured on Rotten Tomatoes, that's at a 50%. So there's obviously an appreciation for the wackiness of this, and I do, just to circle back to the fact that I think critics savaged this in the manner in which that they did because they were expecting something scary, and since it's very much not, since it's very goofy and kind of corny, and yet deliberately, in my opinion, and yet it's got the weird juxtaposition of the fact that it's actually pretty violent. And I know the MPAA, as Martha De Laurentiis was reminding everybody in the retrospective little discussion that she has about the making of the film and everything, and just the process of going to North Carolina where they had already made Firestarter. It's really fascinating stuff, which is another big awesomeness about this Blu-ray release. But she was like, yeah, we went for the gore. We went for that R rating, and, you know, there's F-bombs galore and, you know, racy, very just... King was really trying to write just backwoods, especially with Pete Hingle in this movie, man. he has some of the most outrageous lines where he's talking about, I gotta wipe everybody's ass here, and it's a smelly job or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but yeah, there is some really just laugh out loud dialogue, and I think King was trying to be funny, and yet since he was master of horror and still is, people, especially critics though, were very taken off guard. And I think that's why this film I didn't like it when I saw it as a kid. I wasn't super into it. It was just so over the top and whacktastically strange. But upon these revisits, as I've gotten older, and especially with the revisit that I just did a couple days ago for this, it's grown on me significantly. It really has, in its inherent insanity. And so just to look at a few of the notes here, ironic thing that I came across and was reminded about is that Joe Hill, King's son, of Lock and Key fame and, Horns and Nosferatu and various other things, he said recently, back in October of last year, that he would like to write and direct. And now maybe he said that passingly and jokingly as kind of like just a little rib of his dad. But I would be into that. I mean, the fact that they did that send-up of Duel together, the Richard Matheson, I don't know, King and his son, they used to ride motorcycles together, and there's something about like an open road sort of, I don't know, I think Joe could do a damn good job, and even if he just did it as a comic book or something. But yeah, just circling back to the fact that this film is mass madness. This is mass madness, you maniacs! And the reason I appreciate it is because you can tell King had so much fun, and that he was just tapping into his inner child with this movie, because the extent of the destruction, it's like boom, boom, bang, bang, crunch, crunch, rah! That's really how I perceive his approach to this film, and bless his heart, because even though he has gone on to say it's a moron movie and that he was coked out of his mind and had no idea what he was doing, there is a charm to just the inner child nutsness of this film. And it's so many explosions, destruction of cars, and the fact that there's, characters using rocket launchers to blow up semis. I mean, this film is bonkers, and that's why I have grown and found an appreciation for it. And even the opening scene with King where he's like, hey yo, sugar buns, or honey buns, or whatever he says, this thing's calling me an asshole, and it's one of his more amusing cameos. I just had seen that a couple episodes ago when I was doing that big compilation of all the King cameos, so that was funny. The scale of that opening scene with the bridge and where it's like opening up and everything, that took a lot of work, and I know that there was a combination of both an actual bridge and destruction of actual vehicles, but then there were also miniatures that were used for some of the shots as well, and it's very convincing. Insane, it's over the top, terms that I've used quite a bit, because you start to run out of them in describing a film that just exudes these vibes throughout. But yeah, the bridge starts to open up because machines have been taken control of by this comet, and that's why you've got the weird like green aura that you can see in the sky at certain points, and which the film opens up with in the not too distant future. That distant future, 1987, it's large scale, and you can just tell that a ton of work was put into all of that destruction, from just all the cars flipping over to all the fruit smashing, dude falling off the bridge into the water. I mean, yeah, it is entertaining in just how it was envisioned. I really do think that King did not do as bad of a job. I think it was really more so the fact that it was so poorly received by critics, and then also another thing that I didn't mention was that it also underperformed at the box office. So the budget was around $10 million for Maximum Overdrive, and yet I think it only took in like 3.5 North American, and it just barely over 7 worldwide. So granted, I mean, this wasn't like the scale of today where you have something like John Carter of Mars, aka John Carter, as they stupidly decided to retitle it, where they spend a couple $100 million on a film that just completely bombs. It's not that scale of failure, but nonetheless, King must have really had his ego bruised just a wee bit, and I'm sure that probably didn't help very much with some of the excessive substance intake that he was taking part in at the time, because right around this time you were going to get Tommy knockers, and you were going to finally see him have the intervention from his family and sober up and just quit with the coke and pills and drinks and all this stuff that I would imagine was making this insane Molotov cocktail within King at the time. Damn, man. You have this girl who is very pretty, and I know I haven't really seen her in much else aside from, I want to say she was in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Maybe she was one of the sister or something. Anyway, but Laura Harrington, she is a beaut in this. She is the love interest of Emilio Estevez. And when we first meet her, she has one of my favorite lines in this film, where she's like talking to this Bible thumper guy who is total sleazeball, who has picked her up because she's trying to hitchhike, you know, through North Carolina and get down to Florida. And he keeps touching her leg, you know. She touched me, man, snowman, she touched my leg. But yeah, he keeps touching her leg and she keeps fighting his hand off. And then at one point she's like, if you don't get your hand off my leg, you are gonna be wiping your ass with a hook the next time you take a dump. That's the kind of dialogue that Stephen King wrote for these characters. And yeah, he was trying to go full Southern, I guess, and him being a Maine guy and not really understanding the hick tallness, whatever. This was how Sai King perceived those sort of rough around the edges people. So that was obviously funny. And then you get Emilio Estevez. And his star was rising. I think the year before he had done Almost Fire and then Breakfast Club. And I think the year before he had just done Repo Man, which is one of his first like starring roles, I think, as opposed to being in the Brat Pack ensemble like he got. And yes, he was nominated for a Razzie that year for Worst Actor. And King was actually nominated for a Razzie for Worst Director. But I don't think he's that bad in this movie. I think it's just some of the silliness of the dialogue and some of the odd scenes that King deliberately puts people in, but Emilio is good. I already mentioned Pat Hingle, how funny he is. Yeardley Smith, on the other hand, though, aka the voice of Lisa Simpson, she's so just painstakingly annoying in this film, and I believe he wrote her deliberately as so, you know, as this newlywed who's like, don't make me a widow on my wedding day, Curtis, 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 yeah, over and over with the Curtis, Curtis, Curtis. Oh my god, couldn't King have given us some courtesy and lessened the Curtises? Anyway, yeah, she is written very annoyingly, and credit to her performance, I guess, that she is so unabashedly awful in like just the nails on the chalkboard voice and everything else. So she plays her part very well, but violence that King goes for, and it makes me wonder if we'll ever get to see like a director's cut or an uncut version of some sort in any territory of this. And if it does exist, I know that certain international releases that I was unaware of have been brought to my attention by the Hail to Stephen King Ka-Tet on Facebook, and so if anybody is aware, if it's ever seen the light of day in an uncut form, because even so, the film, there's blood on like everything in this, whether it's, you know, cars, whether it's lawnmowers, whether it's, and then you see just the after effects of stuff like King kills a dog. The dog's got like a police car, like a little toy car, stuck in a remote control car, stuck down this dead dog's mouth. And then you have everything from women being strangled by the cords of their hair dryers, and you see it's the aftermath with a lot of this as the kid is walking through and seeing the just carnage throughout the town. But yeah, he kills a kid in this where it runs over and mushes the kid, one of those street flattener things. So you get that. And even craziness of the soda machine, that kill actually looks kind of gnarly because the cans are going right into Coach's head, the Little League Baseball coach's head. And you see just this gutsy indentation and, you know, just the viscera and like the skull and like goriness and whatnot. And yeah, lots of people get shot up, lots of people getting run over. And that's where I will say that as much as I enjoy and am highly entertained by the first 2/3 of this film, when it finally does become like the full-on bunker situation in like end of the second, early part of the third act, that's where I think this film starts to significantly suffer, the pacing, and it's where we don't really have much going on aside from a little bit of plotting, and then we've got the Bill and Brett love interest thing going on, which is fine. It's cute to a degree. I don't know why she's just all of a sudden calling him hero like at the beginning of it, and then, well, you sure do make love like a hero, or whatever she says. It's just, oh, so silly, so silly. But yeah, so much vehicular destruction. I love the mania of when Pat Hingle's character, the Heckerstone or Heckerstone or whatever the hell his name is, the guy who owns the Dixie Boy, which is where the predominance of this obviously takes place, you know, with all of these people holed up when it does turn into the full-on diner, gas station, bunker film. But he's got this stockpile of weapons, okay? And he breaks out the rocket launchers, and as I said earlier, they're just blowing up these huge semi-trucks and stuff like that. But There's also a scene later in the movie, and this is where there's most definitely a suspension of disbelief, and you can't be a nitpicker, but how can you not be a nitpicker when, you know, you review as much stuff as I do? And that's where I can appreciate just the amusing aspects of this film, but I also have to call out the aspects that were a little bit brain dead. And so, yeah, not only the fact that the newlyweds vehicle that they are driving around is seemingly unaffected. I don't know if that's because it hasn't been, but it is turned off at a couple times. So if all the other vehicles can be unmanned and turn against everybody, why didn't the newlyweds vehicle turn against them? So that's something. And then with the weapons stockpile, we do have that bit in the third act where the vehicle shows up with the machine gun on top, and in one of the most entertaining, there's actually two sequences with the crazy diner waitress who's like, "We made you! We made you!" And she's just going off. She does it early on, and then in the second bit where she gets mowed down by this machine gun. And so is that one okay? Because of the fact that it was like attached to a vehicle that drove up the stockpile of weapons, you know, these machine guns that they have, and, you know, all just a whole stockpile of artillery, including the rocket launchers. Like, why weren't those acting up? And nonetheless, there are some lapses in logic from Sai King, and we all know what was going on with them at the time, as I've mentioned. And so those are at least a few things that I have to nitpick about. There's also just some of the strangest scenes in this, two in particular that I really have to mention. First and foremost, there's a bit where Bill and this guy Joey, who is like Pat Hingle's little like tubby yes man of sorts, and Joey is taking a shit. And Bill, Emilio Estevez's character, decides to come in and take a whiz and have an extensive conversation with him. And we hear all the toots and plopping and all that stuff. I'm sure King, because he has been a fan of toilet humor at times, and there's actually, you know, Emilio and Curtis, they crawl through this like shit tunnel at one particular time as well. So this is where King, I'm sure he was just laughing his ass off and just having a jolly old time writing some of these bits and some of this dialogue here and there. But hey, if I can find the Dumb and Dumber scene where Harry is in the bathroom and it's busted and he's got the violent diarrhea from Lloyd's Jim Carrey, I don't know. I can find humor in stuff like this, but I could also see a lot of other people who are just like, what the hell, King? Like, why would you put this in? And then also, after Brett and Bill hook up, finally, after the kind of weird flirtations, because she just goes right for it, and she's like, you're kind of cute. She's like, you're not that cute. So there is some hammy dialogue, especially between the two of them. You can tell neither of them are exactly the brightest, brightest of minds, sharpest tools in the shed, despite the fact that Pat Hingle's character the whole time is like calling him college boy, and it was giving me echoes of Graveyard Shift to that degree. But after these two hook up, and it's the aftermath of the lovemaking, they're sharing like a pastry of some sort. It looks like powdered donuts. I'm not sure if it's that or some sort of just, pastry with frosting or whatever, but they're like feeding each other and having this conversation, trying to figure out how they're going to escape and, what it's all going to entail. And he has this great plan that they're going to get to, a boat and go off to this island where there's no vehicles allowed or anything like that. And so, decent enough plan. It's been done in other places, I guess. I mean, most notably, the Dawn of the Dead remake does it. But, yeah, it's just a strange exchange of sweet savoring after the sweet loving. So I don't know. But she's like, you're not just a hero. You're a genius. And you're like, I don't know about that, college boy. But nonetheless, there's so much silliness throughout this entire movie. I can understand the burden of expectation, and that King really laid it out with that trailer you guys saw earlier in this video. And I guess rightfully so, people didn't get what they were expecting. But I think with another viewing, and a viewing in the proper frame of mind, like, get a little toasty or, have a drink or two or whatever, I think you will find a lot more to appreciate about this if you just go in with the proper perspective. And yeah, the last thing that I really want to mention, aside from the fact that it's very silly where they're talking to the trucks in the third act and they're gassing them all up, but they're talking as if there is, and yes, there is a cognizance, and that's why they're communicating with the Morse code and all that to even get them filling up the gas in the first place. But I got to give this kid some credit. I don't know what movie he thought he was in because everyone else is hamming it up, but yeah, the young actor who's in this and loses his father and everything and, you know, is on the run trying to get to his dad's place of work and everything. He has a scene where he finds out about the demise of his dad, and he sells it. He sells it good. I mean, just the look of sheer just sorrow in his eyes. I'm not sure what all that kid went on to do, if anything, because I know it's very tough for child actors, but he's very good. He's very good. And the last thing that I really wanted to touch upon here, how can you discuss this film without mentioning AC/DC and the fact that they had this incredibly successful soundtrack to the film that it only had 3 new songs. So the title of this collection, because it's almost like an AC/DC greatest hits that was reminding people about this new era that kicked off really great with Back in Black, but then I know just kind of petered off, at least in the States and perhaps in the UK as well. But Who Made Who went on to be their highest charting single in many, many years. It broke the top 20 in the UK, and it was like around the top 40 in the United States. It was voted second best song of the year in Hit Parader in 1986. And I didn't know that the album actually came out 2 months before the film. So with all of the buzz it generated, you really would have thought that it would have correlated with just higher numbers at the box office. But I wouldn't be surprised if Maximum Overdrive, once again, with how the critics savaged it, and also perhaps word of mouth, you know, hardcore horror fans of Sai King, especially with how kind of bleak the original short story is that was collected in Night Shift. It's like, okay, they probably, you know, told their friends, they're like, it's not scary, it's dumb, not worth your time. And then, I mean, stuff would stay in the box office, you know, for at least a few weeks back then, but not if it was like a total bomb. And this would happen with a lot of stuff in the late 80s with King adaptations, aside from really Pet Sematary that did quite well. The aforementioned Graveyard Shift was another bomb that they put, you know, a lot of time and money into. And so, I mean, yeah, AC/DC obviously probably benefited the most from Maximum Overdrive because, yeah, 5 million copies sold in the United States and such a great charting single. And I really dig that song. Who Made Who it's not one of my absolute favorite AC/DCs, you know, I'm more like a Thunderstruck, but yet a lot of the other songs that, you know, I'd never heard Sink the Pink before, there's no innuendo there, AC/DC, and yet lots of others, like the use of Hell's Bells in the third act is really great. You Shook Me All Night Long, for those about to rock, we salute you. I mean, there's a lot of AC/DC's biggest songs, at least up to the time, in this film. And so I can see why as a comp it's very beloved and why it was so successful. And, you know, even if King was discouraged and, you know, kind of, you know, bruised ego, as I said earlier, after this and never has directed anything ever again, I think that one awesome thing is the resurgence of AC/DC's career due to this film. And so, yes, is it a good film? By no means whatsoever. But is it awesomely bad? I would contend most def. And if you haven't revisited Maximum Overdrive in a while, give it a shot, because it is, boy, it's some of the strangest cinema and one of the weirdest projects that obviously King was ever involved in, and yet once again, crush, smash, fun! You know, it's like a kid playing with life-size versions of like his little Tonka trucks and toys and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm happy that this film exists. And once again, shout out to Vestron Video for putting together this exceptional and just very comprehensively detailed Blu-ray deluxe edition of this. I think they put it out like a year or so ago. But yeah, 35 years of Maximum Overdrive. Will we get that remake from Joe Hill? I don't know, but this has a charm and an appeal that that horrible made-for-television remake entitled Trucks just does not possess. So give it another shot, take it for a ride, if you will. That's my thoughts on Maximum Overdrive and the insanity of Sai King on display in all of its glory. So I extend the grande gracias up in Jaime and Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on the YouTubies, and a like, a share, a subscribe means a hell of a lot. Next week, that is right, Tuesday, August 3rd, I believe, is when Billy Summers comes out. And so in the coming days after that, you can expect a review from me on that. Very, very excited, hoping it's good. I'm sure it will be. Also, though, on August 3rd is where we will be doing our book of the month for, yep, right back there, none other than Black House, the Peter Straub and Sai King collaborative sequel to The Talisman. I had not read it in quite a while, and I most definitely have thoughts, and can definitely say that I see it in a new light, having read all of the Tower stuff, especially because when I first was reading everything in published order, I was not quite to a certain point yet where some more things made sense, I guess. And so very much looking forward to talking about that. So that will be next Tuesday afternoon, which is when these Hail to Stephen King's drop every Tower Tuesday. So that's going to be it for the proceedings today, everybody. Once again, a grande gracias, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, and amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. I hope we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and until then, remember to stay scad and read Stephen King, but obviously, just like I said last week about Lisey's story, in this instance, yeah, I would recommend watching some Stephen King too. It's nuts.